I've got to tell you, this is absolutely unbelievable. Just a few years ago, the stock market's at 25,000. Corporate profits are the highest they've been in decades. The rich keep getting richer. And our friends on the other side said, what do we do now? Let's do a tax cut where 83% of it goes to the top 1% of the wealthiest people. Fast forward a few months, global pandemic, 36 million people unemployed. 40% of families who have a worker that makes $40,000 a year and less lose their job last month. 4 million people didn't pay their rent, and the Republican Party says, we don't have any money to help you. Are you kidding me? Where do you guys live? Food lines around the blocks at our food banks in the United States of America. 1 in 5 kids are going hungry. Your party can't even get food to them. This isn't a wish list. If it's a wish list, it's for the working class people. How about the Teamsters that are going to get a pension when this bill passes?
Gentleman's time's expired.
Their pension gets cut in half.
Gentleman's time is expired.
This is ridiculous.
Gentlewoman from New York
on the American people.
The gentleman from Oklahoma.
This is Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan taking it to Republicans who have oh so predictably rediscovered their fiscally conservative roots just in time to ensure that a relief package that would actually help regular Americans can't pass through Congress. Because God forbid the American people's tax dollars actually go to the American people. Ryan is making this speech in defense of the HEROES Act, which was presented by House Democrats as the next stimulus package. It includes $500 billion for state governments, $375 billion for local governments, $20 billion for tribal communities, and $20 billion for U.S. territories. And because state and local governments can't borrow unlimited amounts like the federal government can, this funding is especially important to keep public workers like police, first responders, and teachers employed. It includes another round of $1,200 stimulus checks, with this time even making filers eligible to receive $1,200 for dependents too. Consider also that Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin said the last $1,200 stimulus check should have been enough to tide people over for 10 weeks.
It's really bridge liquidity for people as they go through these difficult times.
Bridge liquidity for about 8 weeks?
Well, I think the entire package provides economic relief overall for about 10 weeks.
I'd love to see how long Steve Mnuchin can last on one $1,200 stimulus check. I'd be floored if the guy could make it 6 hours. The bill funds coronavirus testing and contact tracing, which the Trump administration never bothered to coordinate months ago when it would have been most effective. And so while we're forced to play cleanup now, it's still monumentally important if we're going to make even a modest attempt at containing the spread of this virus. It would extend expanded unemployment insurance by $600 per week until the end of July and make more people, including freelancers and the self-employed, eligible to receive it. It would also extend expanded benefits through the end of January 2021. And with the unemployment rate at a sky-high 14.7%, this funding is absolutely necessary. And among the most important points is that it would allocate $3.6 billion in funding for elections and vote by mail, which is absolutely essential so that people can exercise their right to vote without having to risk their health to do it. Especially given the fact that in Wisconsin, after the Republican-led state Supreme Court mandated in-person voting despite the outbreak, more than 50 people who voted in person or worked the polls tested positive for coronavirus. And so despite the GOP's desperation to discourage people from voting in densely populated areas, which just so happen to vote Democratic, we clearly need to prioritize safe alternatives so that we don't have to die to have a voice in our democracy. The bill also funds the U.S. Postal Service to the tune of $25 billion, and the USPS is a crucial element of mail-in voting. Republicans are hell-bent on letting the USPS collapse as a way to ensure that vote by mail is impossible, and so they'll sabotage it, or try and privatize it, or do whatever they can to ensure that voting won't be easy and accessible for Americans. So if expanding vote by mail and absentee voting, which by the way, Donald Trump himself takes advantage of, is going to work, then funding the Postal Service is an absolute must. Consider too that the bill doesn't even mandate vote by mail. Instead, the $3.6 billion in requested funding would help states expand vote by mail or no excuse absentee voting, or increase funding for personal protective equipment for poll workers in states that do keep in-person voting. The approaches differ by state, but the through line here is that states need to step up now to ensure that voting is both accessible and safe for everyone. There'd also be more money for small businesses, support for SNAP benefits, COBRA subsidies. The point is that the HEROES Act is not only needed, but delivers help directly to the American people, which is probably why McConnell and Republicans are so vehemently opposed. And that's because McConnell already passed the last bill for corporations, and Democrats, perhaps naively, took him at his word when he promised that this bill would be a clean bill for the Paycheck Protection Program, but the next bill will totally, definitely be for regular Americans. And lo and behold, before the ink had even dried on the bill funding the PPP, McConnell suddenly chilled to the idea of any more stimulus. Why? Because any more funding might actually help the American people, and apparently we just cannot let something like that happen. So in the same way that Republicans pretend to represent working class Americans, in the same way that Trump pretends to be a populist, it's just empty rhetoric, because their actions are proof that their sole priority is making sure that corporations are taken care of while the American people, yet again, get the short end of the stick.